Hello everyone, I'm Vivian and today I'm going to share with you some important aspects for teachers to take into account when we talk about listening. So, first of all, it's important to mention that listening is not only working with recordings, there are many sources that you can use in listening. The first and probably one of the most important is the teacher speak. When the teacher speaks, it's really important for the students because it's in that way they are in contact with the language in a very natural way and in an environment very friendly for them. Also because teachers tend to modify their speech to adapt it to the students' level. So that's really important to keep talking in your classes. Also, music, you can also use, for example, you can invite someone to your class. So someone, of course, who speaks English. Uh, it could be a native speaker or just another person because it is always stimulating listening to someone else. No, not always the teacher. So it's also important. And well, maybe one of the most common today is the internet. We talk about the internet. Internet is everything. It's videos, it's movies, it's music, it's everything you can imagine, and it's a very powerful tool if you teach your students how to use correctly the internet as a tool for learning English. Now, but we as teachers have to prepare our classes. So now I will show you the process that we need to follow or the steps we have to take into account when we are introducing an listening activity in our classes. So there are basically three stages: pre-listening, while listening, and post-listening. And in the pre-listening activity, we need to activate the schemata of our students and give reasons for listening. And something that is very common is try to make them predict what's going on, what is this activity about. So there are different ways, and one of the most common is one of the most common is brainstorming. And brainstorming in very different ways, maybe by taking turns or by writing on the board. And in that way, they can start sharing ideas before they listen to the new information in the target language. Um, Another one is the visual way. So you can show pictures about the listening, the recording they are going to listen, so they can have an idea of what's going on and try to interconnect what they are listening with what they have seen before. And those are some of the sources that the books provide to you for this kind of activities. And another one is the realia. The realia, in the realia you can use, for example, if you are going to put you are going to share an anecdote, for example, so you can use photos of your family members. The idea is to use real things, uh, maps. You can bring an apple, but a real one. You can use a teddy bear, but a real one, if it is present in the recording, in the activity, of if it is relevant for some reason. But the idea is to use something from real world. So photos, maps, toys, whatever. And also it is frequent to use gap fill exercises before listening, just to have a more clear idea of the vocabulary, of the patterns, language patterns. So it is also useful to use the filling the gap activities. No, just to give the clues about what's going on. The situations. So in this case, you can introduce a problem solving task if they are listening is related to that. In this case, when we are working with problem solving tasks, it's really important to take into account the level of our students, the language level, because they have to discuss, and probably beginners are not able to do or to maintain a discussion. So uh, another one is to share opinions, ideas, and facts. Um, the chart of what we know, what we want to know, and then what we learn. After that, it marks like a process before, now, and after the task. What was the outcome? What I learned and what I use, how I can use what I learned to produce something. And speed writing, group writing, quotation, quizzes. So there are many instruments you can use to activate your students' interests, your students' knowledge. So try to think of all the possibilities that are present in in this stage, the pre-listening stage. Now, the while listening, we have to take into account which kind of activity, if it is listen for a guest, so it's just for a general idea. For example, what problem are they discussing? What does the speaker think of the topic? They just have to keep to take an idea from the recording, but not to reproduce exactly what they listen, but using their own language. Different from the listening for detail. In the case of listening for detail, while the task is going on, the students have to take all the details and keep them. Uh, so it's a little bit different from the previous one, and it's also really important to develop this ability in the students. Inferring, in this case, you can pause the recording and then make your students to predict what's going on after listening the first part, what's going on in the what's going on, what they expect from the second part, and also to establish questions to ask while listening. But here is important to give them time to write, because writing and listening simultaneously could be really challenging. But it is also good to expose them to this kind of activities, how they can take notes and participating actively. Listen and describe true or lie, all those activities in which they can be engaged. And it's important also to provide an interesting recording. Maybe your students don't care about the conversations of two of two citizens from Australia, but they do care about the two popular singers. So it is important to use and also to consider introduce authentic materials in order to 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 engage your students, and in that way you can make them participate actively in this stage. Note taking, and while asking questions they can note taking, and but also while listening to phone message, or looking something in a picture. And the books normally provide these kind of activities. For example, here uh, they separate, they organize in a chronological way, or just the relevant aspects to take into account from the recording. Now detection is really popular. Now we have here an interesting way to, no, it's not maybe interesting, but sometimes we avoid dictation and it is really useful. So first you read the passage at full speed and the students listen only. Then read the passage in chunks, leaving time for students to write, and then allow a few minutes for students to check individually. Then read the passage again at full speed and allow a few minutes for students to check in pairs or groups, and then give feedback to the whole class out. And then see, and you can check if they catch the idea, if they did it well. Now, listen and do. It's also important. If you are listening to commands and then you do, you can know if they are really understanding what they are listening. Now, the reflective stage, and this is a stage where you identify the problems. That is the post listening. In the post listening, you identify the difficulties of your students. So you can follow the activity by the constructing the listening task by a gap fill activity, disappearing dialogues, or reordering, or activities of reordering. Those are really useful in this stage. Um, Also to try to analyze the different aspects such as pronunciation, speed, vocabulary, features of good listeners, features exclusive to speakers, discourse markers. So by analyzing them, then you can identify where are the problems. And by the problem solving activity, students can sort in ranking, solving moral dilemmas, but it is also important to try to use these activities with students who are not in beginners level. So information is exchange, then you can make them exchange information about what they have listened before. Now, critical responses also for learners who are more advanced, creative responses for kids, for students for every level. It is important. Any level, in any levels, you can work with creative responses. And discussions, also probably it will be more dynamic if your students are more fluent with the language. And checking and summarizing, another activity, checking previous task. And the reflection, as I mentioned before, we need to take into account to reflect about the activity task, to know which are the weaknesses of our students in order to improve them. So that's almost all. Just this is the end. Thanks for listening, and remember always to reflect. The reflection stage is probably the most important. And please have a nice day.